Welcome to The Whole Picture, where we chat with your favorite entrepreneurs about their passion projects, hobbies, and deep interests, the things that keep them going for the long game. Today, we are here with Kandis James, who has been in the sales world for over 25 years. She trains and consults with entrepreneurs and sales teams. She helps them close more calls and get higher conversions. So, welcome, Kandis, to The Whole Picture.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I'm excited to chat with you for numerous reasons. We found each other years and years ago when I think in one of James Wedmore's programs. And I know I've gone through 1.5 million evolutions since that point in my life. I'm not sure about you, but I'm excited to dive in. So at that point in my life, I found you and I was like just kind of starting out into the sales world, feeling like very not confident in that. And I'm curious where you were in your point there, like in terms of sales. Is that something that you've always been like, this is my thing, I know I'm good at sales, or is it something that like you developed over time?
Yeah, interesting question. When you said like you've been through so many iterations, I could say the same thing. I think back then, because I've worked on a lot of teams doing digital marketing and copywriting and SEO and all of the things that kind of go around sales as well. And I was doing a little bit more of like general business coaching at that point. But over the years, it just kind of seemed that even without me looking for it, people were coming to me and just asking me for advice with their sales systems and how to close. And people were asking me to come on their teams. And I was closing at a ridiculously high rate, even on high ticket offers. And people just kept asking me about it and asking me about it. So eventually I was just like, you know what, obviously this just comes so naturally to me. And I think because I'd been in it for so long, I've started selling commission based when I was 16. My dad was a used car salesman, so insert stereotypes there, but he was in the top 1% for longer than I'd been alive by the time he retired, right? So sales was all around me. And I think for a while, I didn't realize the skill that I had until people just kept seeking me out. And I was like, okay, cool. I could talk about this all day. So it actually just felt like a really easy transition.
Yeah. Isn't it funny? I find this often like people who I talk to that have like this superpower, like I'm good at sales or I'm good at whatever. It's like it's been overlooked in their life because it comes so naturally to them. They're like, I didn't even
Mhm.
know this was a thing that I could be like looked at as an expert in. Was that the case for you?
Pretty much, yeah. It kind of like yeah, I'd always worked in it, but it didn't, I kind of overlooked it, like you said, just because it felt, so it came so easily to me.
So I know you mentioned your dad was in sales. I'm
Mhm.
curious what other things you think contribute to you being so naturally good. I know that you've done quite a lot of travel in your life, and
Mhm.
when I think about the travel that I've done, it really it opened my eyes to different like the ways that different people saw the world and like how different people communicated and stuff. I don't know if you think that that played into it at all, or if you could kind of speak about your experience traveling.
Absolutely. I mean, I had worked in sales for so long before I left. So, but then once I started really traveling, like I've always traveled with my family and things like that, but I left when everybody else around me was buying houses and having babies. I sold everything I owned and just went off to Thailand, which was supposed to be for just a few months. And I ended up living abroad and traveling for 7.5 years. And communication is so important when you're out there, right? You're dealing with a lot of people. Very few of my, good friends actually spoke English as a first language. So definitely, like I always say, sales is really a communication game, right? It's language patterns, it's communication, but not just, what you say. It's really how you communicate as a whole. And so when you're, just surrounded by folks that don't speak English as a first language, I definitely think that that contributed to my ability to communicate with such a more vast subset of people, right? Because you actually have to use all forms of communication versus just relying on the words coming out of your mouth. And you have to really understand people on a different level. And when they're saying things you don't understand, you have to read their body language. You have to really try to understand what's going on. So I would say absolutely that has contributed to my ability to communicate on a deeper level.
That is so cool to me that you have made that decision at that point in your life to go out
Hmm.
and travel. And I have made similar decisions to, like what you said, when everyone else was getting married and having babies, like I come from a very conservative background. And so like my best friend got married at 19 and it was like that was the
Yeah.
norm. You got married very young and you had kids very young. And I did not do that, either of those things. So I'm curious about that moment in your life. Like, did you make the intentional decision, like, I'm gonna go this way when everyone's going that way, or was like travel something that you always wanted to do?
Travel was something I always wanted to do. I remember actually like doodling on a binder in grade 11, I think it was, because I'm remembering like the teacher up at the front of the classroom and I was just doodling on this binder. And I had England, or London specifically, and Thailand like written out and decorated and whatever. And those were like the two main places that I really wanted to spend time in, not just go visit. I'd been to England, I'd been to London, but like actually spend time and understand the cultures of these places. And then, I went to college and then I got a job. And I was at this point where I was like in a career that was fine. I mean, I was managing a private medical clinic. I was making good money. There was nothing wrong with it, but I was like, there's got to be something more for me. And I started playing around with a couple of businesses. I had a cooking business, which was actually going really well, but I either had to like go big or go home. And I was like, I can't see myself doing this forever. I was an image consultant, so I had a bunch of clients doing that, but I also had this like deep-rooted feeling that if I was going to start a business, I needed to really put my time and energy in it. And all I could think about is like, so then when do I travel? So what am I going to be 40 by the time I actually go travel somewhere? And so I just worked like 18 jobs. No, I usually had around five at a time. Five jobs at a time, saved up all this money, sold whatever I could, and was like, now I'm gonna go and travel. And honestly, it was supposed to be 3 months in Asia and then a year in Australia. But when I got to Australia, it was just too similar to Canada for me. I just felt like I missed my family more because it felt so similar to home, but none of my friends and family were there. So I went back up to Thailand until my money ran out. That was the plan. And then as my money was running out, I was like, I'm not ready to go home. So I just started finding ways to work and stay there. And so I ended up there for 5.5 years. Traveled a whole bunch, been to South Africa, been all over Asia, Europe, and then ended up in Italy for almost 2 years on my way home, and then finally came back. So then I kind of felt ready, like, okay, I can actually put the energy that I want. I've seen everything, I've done so much. Um, and even when I had sorry, this is kind of a big story here, but 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I almost died from type 1 diabetes. It was late onset. It was very sudden. I was rushed to the hospital. I was very close to going into a coma or death or whatever they were saying. And I just remember thinking at that time, like, man, I've done more in my life than most people have done by like 70. I've seen more, I've met more people, I've experienced more. And it was kind of like a satisfaction that like, okay, I can hunker down and do whatever I want now because I can fully say that I've lived everything in that aspect to its fullest and now I can do my business. But not to say I don't travel still.
Yeah. Wow. So do you think two things come to mind for me? It is one, like when I'm hearing you talk about all of that, I'm like, one, that's so cool. I like
Hmm.
those experiences are amazing. And two, I feel like I would be anxious or nervous, like being by myself, like traveling that
Hmm.
far away from home. So I'm curious if that was something that came into play for you, or like were you always kind of just an independent, like you felt good on your own and you were like kind of moving through the world that way, or was that like a big change for you?
I would say I've always been independent, but it's a different world when, like independent, I moved from my hometown to the big city as soon as I finished college, like things like that. But it really ups the game when you're in a country where you don't speak the language. Everything is completely different than anything I'd ever grown up with. The culture, there's just every single thing. I don't know if you've been to Thailand. The food, the culture, the buildings, the every single thing is just so different than here. And so that was like a whole whirlwind. And you meet some pretty cool people out there that kind of also are just, you start to kind of form little groups fairly quickly if you stay in a spot long enough. But I think also it really, there was a lot of stuff going on internally back home, as with everybody, right? Like figuring out who you are, how you behave, what you're meant for, blah, blah, blah. And then when I got there, it almost felt like it was amplified because there wasn't really that safety net of the people that knew me and all of that stuff. And interestingly enough, I met this man who studied astrology in university. And he wrote me like this 5-page document about myself. And I read it and I was like, oh my God, this is all true. And there was like some glaring things that I was like, that is not a good person. And that kind of started my own personal development right in that moment. I was like, I don't want to be that way. I'm going to choose to be different in those situations. So like so much happened when I was completely removed. But yeah, so I would say like, yeah, it was definitely nerve-wracking at times. A lot happened to me out there. And you didn't have that safety net, but I would say at the end of it, I'm much better for it.
Yeah. Wow. So he wrote this whole thing out for you. And at that point in your life, had you like gone into any personal development stuff before, or was like that all like very new language for you and you were just like accepting it in the moment because it resonated with you so much?
I'd done astrology. There was a lot of personal development when I was training to become an image consultant because that's part of image consulting to others. Um, and so I was familiar with it. I'd read The Power of Now front to back like 3 times. I've probably read it 8 times in my life. But like, so I kind of had that understanding, but it wasn't until like just, I think, being removed from everything familiar, that it really kind of struck me like, okay, well, I can change that. I can do that differently. And then I also got into a lot of like meditation. I did silent retreats and stuff while I was out there, which were fun. And but yeah, I really just started, I think there's a lot of space when you're on your own. I wrote like a poem story-ish thing one day while I was sitting at this restaurant in Chiang Mai, and just about how you're really forced to look at who you truly are when you're removed from everything that is familiar. Um, it really gives you that opportunity to see who you really are. And so that actually turned into the tattoo I have on my forearm. It's all symbolism. I had a friend draw it out. So now every time I see that, it kind of just reminds me of that situation. But yeah, I just kind of slowly went more and more into that.
Yeah. It's so cool that you just mentioned that you had like that realization that you can have those experiences sometimes more when you're removed.
Hmm.
Because like our environment plays such a role in habits and like who we are is like somewhat of a habit, right? Like we are the person that we are because of our environment and the habits that we
Hmm.
created there. So as you were traveling, like I know I was just traveling and I was like, everything I know is wrong right now. Like I don't know where any of my supplements are. I don't know where any of my socks are. Like you feel kind of like you're having
Hmm.
to reinvent every moment in your day as you're
Hmm.
traveling. So I'm sure that that played into it. So as you were going like past the point that you were gonna, stop traveling as it kept, inching further and further into the 7 years that it was, were you like at any point being like, maybe I'm gonna be like a digital nomad or like never really come out of this like travel experience? Or did you always have in your mind like, okay, I am gonna go back at some point, but like I still want to do all of these things?
It was never really set in stone for me. one way or the other. It was like things were just happening that I was happy with. So, first I got a job doing SEO for some company, then social media management for another, and then all these different things. And they were just falling into place. And I was loving it. All I knew was kind of in the next 6 months, do I want to go home or do I not? And that was pretty much as far ahead as I was thinking about things. And then the reason that I ended up actually coming back was because my father had some health scares, and it freaked me out that I was 36 hours minimum from there, right? So then I was like, okay, I'm coming back. But then I met someone and I ended up living with him in Italy for almost 2 years. So it was closer. So I felt a little bit better about that. But to your point, like, for the first 6 months, I was literally living out of a backpack. And for the first 4 months, I was never in one place for more than 4 days. Um, so I remember the first day in Chiang Mai where I got like a bungalow for 2 months and I could actually take my stuff out and like put it on a dresser. And I was like, wow, I feel so settled. Like I only had like 5 shirts and, but I just felt like I had finally settled. And it was a great feeling. And Chiang Mai was from the moment that I set foot there, it was just like, oh, I feel like I'm home. And I felt like I was able to be the truest version of myself, to be honest, while I was out there.
And what do you think, like, what attributed to that, do you think? Like, just in general, you specifically z zeroed in on London and Thailand. So, like, were those places that you were, like, experienced things about as a kid? Or, like, what do you think was, like, drawing you to those places specifically?
I don't know. I don't know what, like London, I had experienced it. I loved it. I love all the old stuff. I love the history. Um, and Thailand, I don't know. It was just, I'd seen pictures and it was something in my head that I just felt like I had to go there. And when I got there, particularly in Chiang Mai, I was like, oh my goodness. Like it was this like home feeling. I don't know. I don't know why I wanted to go there, but there was something saying that I needed to be there.
Yeah, I experienced the same thing with New York. That's where I live now. And the
Hmm.
first time that I came here, it almost felt nostalgic to me. I don't know if you had that experience, but I had this feeling of like nostalgia. Like I had been here
Hmm.
before or like something was like pulling me here. And I knew things like I just was like, oh, you go to this side of like it made sense to me the way the city was laid
Yeah.
out. So like was that similar to you in that experience?
Yeah, totally. Like as soon as I set foot there, I was like, like I can't really explain it other than it just felt like a sigh of relief. Like when you get home to your bed at the end of a day, like it just felt like, oh, okay, this is where I was going. Because I had traveled all around Thailand before I got to Chiang Mai. And it was great and I loved it. But when I set foot in that particular city, I was like, oh, there we go. This is why I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, I don't know the name of it, if you came across this at all in any of your astrology studies or like any of your personal development studies, but there's like something that takes your like your birth chart and then like it tells you like where you're supposed to be in the world like for certain periods of your life
Mm.
or something like there's like a Pluto line and like there's like certain like lines that
Oh,
you're like
interesting.
supposed to be lined up with, I guess, at certain points in your life. Did that ever come up in any of your astrology stuff?
That did not come up, but that's very interesting because there was a very clear pull.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like I have to look more into it. Maybe I can do it and put it in the show notes here, but yeah, it was fascinating to me because I tend to go down like personal development rabbit holes. Like it's not something
Hmm.
that I would ever like, create a business around or do anything like that, but like I'm like, human design was huge for me for a while. I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And then I don't,
Yeah.
pick it up for a while, but like, I studied it deep and all that.
Yeah.
So very cool. Okay, so you were there and then you came to Italy. You were in Italy for a while.
Hmm.
And then you went back to Canada?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious, like now that you are a little more like, were you about to say that you still travel frequently, or are you in Canada
Oh,
most of the time?
I mean, I travel a lot for work, and I try to travel for pleasure as often as possible. Um, but yeah, go ahead.
So as you are now like a little more like more settled, past that point where you're traveling a lot, do you find that it was like easier for you to just thinking about what it's like to be traveling all the time where you're like always moving around, you're always, reinventing these routines and stuff. Do you find that it's easier for you to like kind of go with the flow as you're like now you're home, but like you're so used to being able to like move through things and like be here this day and here this day? Do you find like that it's easier for you to kind of go with the flow or like notice certain things that help you now from your travel experiences?
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of like the chicken and the egg. Was it because I'm very good at just going with the flow that I was able to just pack up and go by myself? Because a lot of people that it's that part of the idea that freaks them out, that it's just me, right? Like I'm just like, okay, bye, here I go. Um, so, you know, but yes, I think it's kind of like I said, chicken and the egg. I was kind of like that already. But the more that and I was usually quite good at, if like a crisis averted. I remember one time being in an airport with my family and this thing happened and blah, blah, blah. And it was like one person went into a panic attack. One person starts crying. This person starts getting angry. And I'm like, I just walked up to the person at the front. I was like, okay, so what are our next steps here? Right? Like, what do we do? Like, I'm always kind of thinking of like, it is what it is. And I think, especially traveling, you have to get used to that. Going into different cultures where, things just aren't the same. Like if they bring you the wrong food in a restaurant in Thailand, you usually just eat it, right? Like you're just like, oh well, okay. Um, things like that definitely increased it for sure. And then obviously doing, spending 7 days in silence at a temple also increases the ability to just be with what is, right? And so that's a huge part of actually like my sales training that I bring into training is the energy with which you are presenting things, that you are being before and after your sales calls, because it's wildly important. And if we have any outside judgment coming through our minds, then we can, screw everything up, basically.
Yeah. What do you attribute that to? Like your ability to accept what is and kind of just like move through the world that way. Is that something that you always innately had, or is that something that like as a kid it was like nurtured into you? Like this is, we have to just accept how it is. Like where do you attribute that to?
I would say that as a kid, I was like often like the peacekeeper within the family and stuff like that. Like, okay, let's have a family meeting. I'm like 10 calling a family meeting. But as I got older, I went through school. I was bullied in school. Then I had all sorts of stuff in college. And I don't know, I kind of came out of it with a bit of an attitude, let's say. And I did get fired up quite quickly. Things would bother me, things would fester. I would like ruminate on things. And I read The Power of Now, and it was actually interesting. The Power of Now, the first time I read it, it was introduced to me by my image consulting professor. And the first time I read it, I took a yellow highlighter and highlighted anything that made sense to me. And the first time I read it, there was so much that went over my head. But I put into practice whatever I could. And the next time I read it, I used an orange highlighter and highlighted anything that made sense to me. And the stuff in yellow seemed like common sense. And now I was finding new tidbits. And I did that about 5 times. Then I lost that copy of the book. I was so sad. But anyways, I lost it on my travels. But I kept doing that and realizing that I could go deeper with it and deeper with it and deeper with it. So honestly, that book was one of my biggest teachers. And then that brought me to Thailand, where literally you just have to sit in meditation for like 10 hours a day. Um, you feel annoyed, you feel angry, you think, why did I do this to myself? Why am I sitting here? I haven't eaten in almost 24 hours and I'm just sitting here doing with my eyes closed. But it really does like rewire the brain and teach patience and the ability to just stay present. So all of that has just increased over time. And, now even just being on sales calls and stuff, that ability to stay present is really valuable.
So, what did inspire you to seek out? Did you seek out that meditation retreat, or was that something that like other people around you were doing? Like, what inspired that?
So the temple that is in Chiang Mai where I did my meditation is up on this mountain. It's one of the oldest temples in Thailand. And the first time I went up there on like a tourist like group trip. and it was pouring rain, and there's something like 350 steps to get up to the top. So walking through the pouring rain, we get up to the top, and there was just like this stillness. And I wrote about this in the book I wrote, but there was just this like absolute stillness and this peacefulness. And I was just like, whoa, like it just hit me so hard. And I just didn't want to leave. Like everybody was walking around talking, and I just like took off from the group and was just wandering around in complete silence. And there was this peacefulness that was there that I just couldn't deny. Um, and then at the front, I saw that they had the opportunity for foreigners to come in for silent meditation because they had to have obviously English speaking instructors. Um, and so I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do it. But for years, I put it off until the year that I was supposed to be leaving Thailand. And I was like, I can't leave without it. Um, so I went, and then I actually flew back to Thailand the next year and did it again because it was absolutely magical and tough, but magical.
Yes, it sounds incredibly tough. And one thing I noticed when what you just said was like everyone else was walking around and talking and this and that, and I felt this. And I've noticed you say that a few times in this, like everyone else was doing this and I felt this. So it seems
Mhm.
like you're really in tune with like, I don't know if it's your intuition or like just the way that your body is speaking to you. Like, is that something that you have developed? Is that something that you notice within yourself that you pay attention to that?
Very much. And I think everybody can feel it to some degree, right? It's just how much attention do you give it? And I started to notice that when I really believed something to be true, but went against it or tried to force myself to not believe it because it wasn't convenient or something like that, it usually just ended up in a big pile of shite. You know what I mean? Whereas if I leaned into it and trusted myself, it usually ended up so much better. And so, yes, that's something that I've just purposefully paid more and more and more attention to. And the more that I do that, the more that it guides me in the right direction.
Yeah. Is that something that you use also in your business as well, like in sales calls and in sales training and everything, or is it something more just like on the personal side of things?
I mean, I do my best to tune into it at all times, right?
Yeah.
There's always something guiding out there is my belief. What it is and what you want to call it and whatever is up to anybody, but there's definitely like an energetic pull, and I can feel it in my body, and I trust my body's there's to listen to that energy. I remember coming home when I was supposed to be coming home from Thailand for good, and I was home for the summer, and my uncle said to me, "Oh, so it's so great that you're actually back." And I said, "Actually, I'm going to Italy next." And he's like, "When?" I was like, "Oh, in 3 weeks from now." And he's like, "What?" He's like, "How do you make these decisions? These are like big life decisions, and you're just like, actually, no." And I was like, I don't know. I just like let myself imagine version one and like really imagine it, picture it, feel it, hear it, everything. And then I picture option two, and I do the exact same thing. And whichever one feels better in my body, I pick that one.
Interesting. Is that something that you develop, like you just decided one day, like that's how I'm going to make decisions, or like how did that come about?
Guess just like thinking about it. Like a lot of people will make lists of like, pros and cons and things like that. I don't work that way because I could logically tell you that either way could work. But the only way it's going to work is if the energy in my body is fully behind it. So I have to dive into that. And I used to do a lot of training with folks to discover what they wanted out of life. And we used to practice this together. And it is something that you can teach yourself, right? To be able to hone into that more. And then I always keep like an evidence journal. So especially if I'm trying to learn something else, or I need to trust myself in a certain way or what have you, I always keep an evidence journal. So when I follow that particular path or exercise that I want to do, and then when it works out to my favor, I always write it in the evidence journal so that I'm training my mind and body to trust itself in that path.
That's so cool. I never have thought about doing that exactly, but it is like I know probably from training with you and James, just about like how your brain looks for the things that you deem important, or like that you're like, okay, now I've seen, like I'm looking at buying this kind of car and now I see it everywhere. So that's basically
Hmm.
what you're doing, right? Like you're training your brain to look at the times it's worked.
Hmm.
Wow, very cool. So, as you were experiencing all of this in your travel and all of these like kind of personal developments that you had, in all of these ways that you're like developing your intuition and all that, did you know where it was leading from a career perspective, or were you still like, I don't know exactly what that's going to be like, but I know that I want to work on myself like throughout all of this?
Yeah, I knew that I wanted to work for myself. I don't work, it's not that I don't work well in, I can work anywhere really, but I prefer to be in charge of myself, um, to put it that way. And I knew that I wanted to start something. I wanted to help people through their own personal development and their own learning about self and energy. And it's amazing because the effects that just being able to control your energy, whether you can raise the energy, lower the energy, whatever you need to do, by being able to be in control of that, you can change situations that are not to your liking very quickly. So you can de-escalate situations, or you can escalate situations, whatever you need to do. As long as you can control the energy, you can begin to control the energy around you as well. So that, and then that also, the brain doesn't know the difference between something that's real or something that's imagined. So then using that on your own inner state. So if you're feeling upset or you're feeling fear, being able to imagine a different emotion can change the physiological response of your body, right? So all of this stuff I just absolutely love. And I think for a long time I wanted to just share that with people. But it's really hard to explain the power of it. And people, unless they're already into that kind of woo-woo stuff, they're not as accepting of that. And it's ultimately, as a business owner, it's a little bit of a harder sell. And so once I realized, when I was coaching people on sales, and particularly in sales, and shifting that energy, we were using all the exact same tools, but they had an outcome of getting sales. And so all the members that I have inside of my program and the people that I work with, like, they're like, this is so much more than learning how to be a good closer. Like, the one girl always jokes, she's like, I don't even need a therapist. I just come to my sales trainings. But I just get really excited now because I've kind of merged my two worlds. And it's really fun and really exciting, and I love it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say is that like often previously when I was
Mhm.
like learning about sales or thinking about sales, it always felt very rigid and very like I don't know how to explain it, but in my brain it felt like how math feels. Like it felt very calculated and
Mhm.
not with like soul or heart, or like it was kind of like to me it was like sales and then like creativity was like over here.
Mhm.
But it sounds like what you've done is like infuse like being a human and like intuition and like personal development into sales, which is such an interesting perspective. So talk a little bit about that and like how you work with people now as a sales and consultant.
Yeah. I like to refer to it as compassion-based selling. So we are building up compassion for these people, right? So there's like sympathy, empathy, compassion. Sympathy, for those who aren't aware of the definitions off the top of your head, sympathy is basically like, oh, yes, I kind of feel sorry for you. I see that something bad has happened to you and I feel sorry for you. Empathy is like, I see that something bad has happened and I feel for you, right? Compassion is basically empathy. Okay, I see something bad has happened. I feel for you and I want to help you. Right. This is when I got back to Canada, I did like a university training in applied mindfulness. So taking the concepts of all of that meditation and mindfulness, and then how do we apply it into day-to-day life? So we use that as well, right? And that's a huge part of applied mindfulness. So is the compassion piece. And so when we are in a sales call, we're looking at the person as a person who has a problem that potentially you can solve. And then we need to be able to, they want they want the solution, but a lot of the reasons that they're going to say no is because they're scared for whatever reason. There's fear behind it, fear that it's not going to work, fear they're going to be called selfish, fear blah blah blah. There's all of these different things that are going behind. And as a salesperson in those, I call it kind of bro energy sales. I think kind of what you were talking about, it's very like, so then you go in harder and then you say this, and I'm like, no, 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 no. What we want to do is we want to get them comfortable enough to really tell us what's behind that no. And when we use language patterns, so I'm also a neurolinguistic practitioner. So that helps us use language that allows the subconscious mind to feel comfortable with you and safe with you. And that will allow them to actually open up and you can have a deeper conversation, which will make the sale close faster.
Wow. And so when you were taking that program, I love that you took that because I do find that often like I learned a lot. I went on a big like personal development journey and then I kind of turned around and was like, but I'm a copywriter still. So like how do I like these are
Yeah.
two different things. So that's so cool that you did that. And when you were going through that, were you thinking about sales or was it still like I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do, but like I know I'm going to use it in my career path like working for myself.
Yeah, I was taking it. Well, meditation is great, but most people aren't going to go spend 10 hours a day meditating to gain all of the benefits from it, right? And so I was just really curious with this program at the university of like, okay, you're telling me how we can apply this to business, how we can apply this to this, and just looking at it outside the box and also applying it in a way for people to understand without making them sit on a cushion for 3 hours a day, right? So at that point, I was still working in marketing, and actually, one of the professors at the university was had his own program that he was starting this conference. And because of my experience in marketing, he asked me on to be the marketing manager of this global conference on mindfulness. So I got to meet some of like the coolest doctors and teachers in the space. It was really awesome. But I was already kind of integrating that and using it from, especially in that space, a lot of people, they're doing it because they want to help and they love the mindfulness aspect and all of that, but they have a hard time going into sales mode because then they think that they're being pushy or manipulative or whatever it is, right? So it was right then and there, I was learning how to just put the two together to make them feel comfortable, but also be able to get the point across. And it was at a similar time I started doing neurolinguistic programming. So we were kind of adding all of that in as well.
Yeah. So NLP is so fascinating to me
Hmm.
because it is like I've heard it described as like the textbook that we never got for our brain because
Yeah.
it's like it's image based. Well, maybe I'll let you talk about it a little bit, but it's basically like using images instead of words in your brain. Is that like similar to how it is?
You could say that. So there's a lot of different ways in which you can use NLP. A lot of people can release a lot of trauma using NLP, and it can also just make communication softer. So we also learn just by having a conversation, how to dictate. This is also something I use for my clients, right? How do we dictate the way that a person makes purchasing decisions? And we can tell that when they speak maybe two sentences. There's things that you're looking for, all that sort of stuff, right? So you can kind of use that to your advantage to make them feel most comfortable. So yeah, I mean, there is sort of it's kind of a map to the subconscious. And I think a lot of us don't realize how big of a role the subconscious is playing in every single conversation, in every interaction. Like right now, everybody listening is listening to the words, but they're forming subconscious opinions, judgments, ideas based on everything that has been said during this time.
Yeah. Wow. I think that is what makes it so unique. Like what you're talking about is really understanding the person who you're speaking to and selling to. And it seems like you wouldn't have gotten there necessarily without all of your experience traveling the world,
Mhm.
without all of your personal development, without all of that. Would you say that's accurate?
I would definitely say that's accurate. It's like just this whole amalgamation of things that has just continued to spark my ability and interest in these types of things. And the more that I seem to have, like, I find out another cool tactic, I'm like, oh, okay, how do we move into this? But ultimately, at the end of the day, just being able to read people. And a large part of that has just been, you know, getting out there and being with people that are different than you, because that stretches your ability to communicate, your communication muscles.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I know that you have a mini course that you want to share with everyone. Tell us just a little bit about that, and then we'll put all the details there in the show notes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's called Unlock Your Sales Potential. And we go over we go over the foundations of kind of what we talked about. So a lot of people want sales scripts. I feel like they're robotic. So instead, I have a sales pathway that will show you exactly what you need to get from the prospect so that you can get them to the sale. There's some of the language hacks that we talked about in there, and as well as some of the best ways to bust the most common objections. And it's just a short mini course that's usually on for 444, but you guys have a discount code to grab it for free.
You're awesome. Thank you so much for that. Where can people find you? We'll put all the information for the mini course in the show description. Where can people find you and follow along with your travels and all your trainings?
Instagram is a great place at CandisJames.kj, or my website, CandisJames.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Candace. This was awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Brittany. It's great to be here.